our beloved Tim Carroll, 4 grandparents in the area.
8 great-grandparents.
4 sets of grandparents in the area. Proud graduate of the University of Notre Dame, distinguished ex-diplomat, sometimes still a diplomat, and we're thrilled that he's going to do the program today. This must be the 8th program you've done? How many programs have you done for OMPHS?
Yes, this is the one and only original.
He's done many programs for the Historical Society. Thank you, Tim.
And let me tell you about Judy Weaver. Don't ever take her call. She's a darling woman, but she doesn't take no. Oh, gee, I can't see. Well, this is the little booklet from which that Jack Solomonson put together of this World War II event. And her letter to the troops, her husband says, fall is upon us and the weather's changing. And now that you're so far away and can't see our countryside, the next best thing might be to view it through someone else's eyes, and that is my good wife, and to do that, my good wife has undertaken just to do that. And so we then start with quotes from Mrs. Let's call her Carol from now on. So she starts, how would you like to take a drive down Center Road on the peninsula with me? The first thing that strikes our eyes as we leave the forks of the road, and I'm going to break her sentence there, because I want to know how many of you know about the forks of the road. Because in the 40s, everything was measured from the forks of the road. You lived 9.5 miles out from the forks, or it was 3 miles to the forks, or everything. And Barbara took that picture in the morning, standing on the west side of Peninsula Drive, and you're looking at automobiles one coming south and 2 going north on Center Road. Now I want a show of hands of how many of you people who live on the peninsula have stopped to read that plaque on that boulder. Let's see all the hands. Judy, let's see all the hands that are honest. Well, I want to tell you who's on that plaque.
Where is it located?
Well, take out the adapter. I'm going to the forks of the road. Is the last stoplight as you come out onto the peninsula, where it's been like that even when peninsula, what is now called Peninsula Drive, was a dirt road. At any rate, there was always a triangle there of a little garden that Mrs. Margaret Wilson, the daughter of her husband, the wife of Mr. Wilson, on Wilson Road, a little lady that, about the age of my grandmother, short, round lady, and she was very, very active in the community. And an important thing to remember about the 40s is that nowadays the peninsula sort of ends about Greg's Crossroad, because everybody from there kind of goes to town, and it's hard to imagine that this was the center meeting place, and that was because of 2 societies, the Farm Bureau and the Grange. There were six school districts which subdivided, but everybody with a farm on the peninsula came here for those 2 sets of meetings, and that kept everybody knowing who was who. And so on Saturday, when everyone had to go to town to take the cream can, because every farmer had some kind of cows to feed the family, milk and butter and all that, the wives had to do the washing in the morning and the night of this thing that separated the milk from the cream. And the wives collected the cream and took it on Saturday to the dairy, and they would get the money for it, called the pin money, with which they could do all kinds of remarkable things. And this is the days before we had the casino, so it was spent for, But she made a garden always every summer at the Sports Road, and Margaret Wilson was the leading Republican lady out here. And the little woman somehow got on a bus or a train and went to Washington, D.C. every year to see what the places these people were doing in Washington, D.C. and reported back. She's an amazing little woman, and On my 16th birthday, I had badgered my parents that I wanted to go see the House of Representatives. And so we, in March of 1950-something, we went off to Washington, and Dad, who was one of the 3 Democrats on the peninsula, had some way of getting tickets, and we finally got to the gallery of the House of Representatives. Well, in 15 minutes, you're bored senseless, but I had seen democracy at work. But we looked across the gallery, which surrounds the whole pit with the 435 representatives, and there was Margaret Wilson. So we somehow waved a handkerchief and met in the corridor, and my Democratic father and her Republican lady. And those were the days when you actually liked each other, when you were in separate parties, and you know, talk and be amicable and share stories. And we dodged Mrs. Trimmer's guinea hens. Now I have to tell you, one of my first memories in the world is my father swearing at those guinea hens. And this house is now lived in by gypsies, but I think you'll or something like, and it's on the west side of the road. But here is where the guinea hens had their little houses, and they were all like really real houses. They were doll houses all in a row, and the guinea hens would be in and out. And Mrs. Trimmer was totally cuckoo. And of course, guess what her husband did, Mr. Trimmer? He was a barber. And the fusion, this was one of the things I like to look for. This was Dr. Lawbeck's spring house. And I always, you can see it better, but there was this wonderful place where you stored things, and it looked like, you know, a pirate's hideaway or something. So my trip to town was taking a look at that. And then we move on to her next statement. This thing is his new barn. Frank thought he was going to join you in the army, but the doc said no. So he is going to raise some good beef for you. His father-in-law, Ben Koenig, now everybody knew about Ben Koenig, but nobody ever met him, because he was some kind of a barn architect. And he's having Frank build just the latest things in barn, and it's up to the 3rd story now, and it sure looks like a dilly. So there. And it stirred a huge, I remember we had to slow down and take a look at it, and the business for moving the hay in and out, that top thing was, nobody had seen a barn like that in the peninsula. You have to remember, there was not all cherries in 44. People had corn and oats and vegetables, and people raised hay for the horses and cows. The layout was different. She continues. Mr. Hardwick has bought part of Ed Matheson's farm. He bought the whole peach orchard. And he's put up a fruit stand with a sign saying Peninsula Heights Orchard. I guess he moved a lot of peaches from it, but the peach market was bad this year as there's no sugar available to use for candy. I'm trying to get the mood here. Now, just past there, as you come up over the top of what is known as Carpenter's Hill, there is a yellow house on the west side, and originally it was just the little house on the left. And I wanted to pay homage to the lady who lived there, Mrs. Ethel Brush, and her husband Ferd. Now I always had Ethel Brush, and no matter how bad the storms and no matter how bad the floods, she was in her Model A, and she was there every morning in her little black clumpy shoes, teaching from K through 7 without a burp, and we all loved her to pieces, Mrs. Ethel Brush. Now then, you're now on Carpenter Hill, looking south. And one of the things that I want to do is show some old sections of Center Road. Because it was in the 30s when they finally got to no longer run the Center Road went along property lines, so there were lots and lots of right-hand turns coming out here, or left-hand turns, but 45-degree angles, because everything was squared off according to the farm property. And that's an example of that road that used to go, and then it joins up at the bottom, and there was McKinley School. The road would come right straight up toward McKinley School. That's McKinley School, now a house. They sold for around $4,200 when the 6 school houses were sold when they consolidated in the mid-50s. And let's get on with the trip, she says. Harold Titus and Ozzie Hertner Jr. have some nice fields of corn. When you're driving, coming up the hill there from the fire, you come around the corner from the fire engine, those pine trees are still there, and there's a beautiful Victorian home there that was known as Ozzie Hertner lived. And Harold Titus actually lived so that he could see East Bay, and he was a retired novelist and had money and used to invest in other farmers doing things. It's exactly where the Underwood Dippy-Dup is now. Underwood having been the lieutenant farmer at the time, so I didn't know what went on there. But anyway, Harold Titus was one of the other Democrats living out here. So she writes now, as we go through the stretch of road from Grubb's Corners, and I stopped to give a shout out for old Mr. Grubb. This was known as Grubb's Corner and is now a prettified boat launch. It was a ma and pa kettle operation back in the day. One always looked out for some new disgrace spread out there on the way to town. It was the most run. Are there any Grubbs here tonight? It was just like the chickens in the house and pigs in the yard, and it was just, well, it wasn't the pretty peninsula, you used to know that. But I look forward to that. There's nothing like a new disgrace. And the other thing I would look forward to is, it's been enlarged upon, but this is the Boswick house. He owned the Michigan Starch Company, which I don't know why it was in Traverse City, but he was the first person to build a house out here that was sort of a city home, and those two big pillars were very impressive. I always thought it looked like Tara from Gone with the Wind. But that's what I would look for. And then she goes, and this is just an addition from me. You've got people look at this barn and probably think it's a normal barn, where you're completely wrong. Because in the late 40s, and I don't know who owned the farm at the time, that was, what you're looking at is the roof of the barn set on the foundation of the barn. And in the middle part of the barn, which was probably 20 feet high, it was a giant barn. And they somehow got somebody, or for whatever reason, they took the whole middle out of the barn and just set the roof on the foundation. Well, you should have heard the farmers talking about that. What's that guy thinking about? That doesn't look like a barn at all. So that's the sort of thing we can have conversations about going into town. And she goes on to say, when we pass the schoolhouses, now remember this is 1944, we see queer-looking orange-colored bags hanging up along the fences and from the crotches of trees. These are part of the children's war effort, as the bags contain milkweed pods, which are dried in these mesh bags and then sent to a factory in Petoskey that makes milkweed fluff into filling for life preserver jackets, which are provided for all of you when you take trips at sea. The kids get 20 cents a bag full and are really keen on the job. So you get the feeling of the whole community in the spirit of that. I happen to remember this, and I don't know why she thinks those are strange red bags, because they were onion sacks. And my brother made me help him, he was 8 years older, and I worked my little fingers off getting all the bags full, and I never heard about the 20 cents. One of two schools out here who still has the original bell in their belfry. The other one is Harbor, and that was closed in the 20s, and joined Mapleton because the people from Cincinnati had purchased the whole Neonawad Point there, and so there was no farm kids. So Harvard had to close, and those, like Carol Ann Cropa had to walk more than a mile and a half that he was supposed to be able to get to a schoolhouse out here. This is the Murray household, and he was the editor, and she's the one we're talking about. That's just further along on the west side of the road, and they were quite new people, like they'd come in 1900 or something. And she had money. Are there any Murrays here? Anyway, and they owned the 400 acres, which was probably the largest farm on the peninsula, called Ridgewood, where she ends this little tour. But her husband, besides being the editor of this, this is just north of them on the west side. Now there's 4 or 5 large houses. That was Ben Murray's fox farm. And since my dad was raising mink and he was raising fox, they always had a lot to talk to. But when Ben Murray pelted out with the foxes, he left the pens there for decades. People much younger than I may remember this was all old pens and things. Fox took up quite a good sized pen. And of course now it's real estate, and that's the end of that. I don't know if, I'm terribly fond of cairns. Cairns, I presume, were started being built on the peninsula by Scottish immigrants, but you can find them here and there. Albert Cropa's old farm has a set. There's a couple out Peninsula Drive. They originally, in Scotland, would have been boundary markers, but they just became sort of ornamental. And anything made with Michigan stone, I always thought was worth paying attention to, and still do, actually. So when you're out looking around, there's a cairn at the end of the peninsula that has it's a memorial to the poison. This is the Archie Hall, and that was still around when my parents were young because they used to go to dances there, and Dad played on the Peninsula baseball team league, which I think was divided up, even though they were graduates of the primary schools. I think that Mapleton and Maple Grove played, and it was big enough to have a basketball court inside. And it was built on the same, actually it was looked the same on the outside as this building did, and they were built about the same time. And according to the 1880 plaque book, there was a post office there, but I've never seen anything about it. So to go back to Mrs. Murray's letter, she starts to say about, we go quickly past the stretch of road past Rubb's Corner to Fred Garland's. And that's where that little marquee sign is. There used to be a very, very nice house there, but very close to the road. And Fred Garland had lost we only had 2 boys killed in World War II, and one of them was Fred Garland's son. And then in the Korean War, his daughter lost her husband, so he lost his son-in-law in the Korean War. But that widow married Mr. Doe, whom you all may know, because Charlie only died a couple years ago, Charlie Doe. But they had to tear down the house in the end because it was practically on top of the center road. The Garlands were a very, very old family out here. But at one point they knocked down their cellar, the cellar of the house, and used it as a garage because it was right there and they could dodge in and out quickly, and so I thought that was good. Here we're at Maple Grove School. Now Maple Grove School, they're collecting, she writes, scrap iron for the next drive. And old car and some other things are already there. Well, we did scrap iron at Mapleton too, and I never got any money for that either. There's a picture of my brother, he's about 13, driving a tractor and pulling a great big old septic tank or something behind him. Beside Maple Grove School is this sign, which you've probably all wondered about, and that is Carroll Road goes on both east and west, but on the east side was Edward Carroll, my great-grandfather, who came here with his wife, Jane Holman, who was the sister of the Holmans, and his sister married a Buckins. So the Buckins and the Carrolls and the Holmans all came from Guelph, Ontario, where their parents had spent one generation coming from other places. They all landed here. And everybody visiting me likes to walk across the road, and you see in the left-hand side, that's a Carroll Road sign, and you can get the dead end. Somehow people think that's incredibly funny. Now, this is Buff Cropa's, I like this part. Buff Cropa's. She talks about Buff Cropa's contour orchard looks fine. This was a very big deal in my earliest memories. Farmers always had to have, orchardists always had flat land to grow their orchards. And somewhere in the 40s, the contour orchards started coming in, probably due to the extension agents, the agricultural extension agents were very good about teaching farmers new ideas, the ones that were open to them. Anyway, Buff, I don't know why she's talking about his contour farm, because he hardly has any hills there. It's that 80 acres is for sale right now. But anyway, it was a contour farm, and my father, I remember planted contour farms as well. Buff, of course, Cropa. Are there any Cropas here? Surely there's a Cropa here. Buff Cropa came back from World War II with his pockets stuffed with money, and I'm not going to go any further. But he did it all fair and square according to legend. We were allowed as a GI to send a certain amount of money home each day, and he did that every day. and never exceeded the amount, but his wife pocketed it all, and that's how he got rich when he got old. But again, I'm reporting from the middle 40s when I was 5 years old. Okay. And she writes, and Bob Seberg is busy painting his house. That's Bob Seberg's house, and it's on the, as you go north, it's on the right-hand side. It's where Monica and Bill Huffman live now. Monica was also the name of Bob Seberg's wife, and somehow she and Monica got to be friends with Monica and Bill got up. But I remember when that stone porch went up, there was a whole lot of remodeling right after the World War.